Senator Joe Manchin is willing to show Democratic voters just how low he's willing to go in parroting right-wing talking points. This time it's in the context of DC statehood, a state that has, or I should say an area of the country that has nearly 700,000 residents, but they don't get the Democratic representation they deserve. So there has been an effort in order to make DC a state to ensure that they're properly represented in this representative democracy. But Joe Manchin, a conservative Democrat, isn't having it, and he gives you a weak sauce reason for why in this interview. Take a listen.
Do you support or oppose congressional action to make Washington, D.C. a state?
I did a deep dive on that, and I had my staff go through it. It's not a new one. The D.C. statehood's not a new one. President Reagan's Justice Department really carefully reviewed it with legal scholars in 1987. President Carter's Justice Department did the same thing 10 years before that. Attorney General Bobby Kennedy looked into it. They all came to the same conclusion. If Congress wants to make D.C. a state, it should propose a constitutional amendment. It should propose a constitutional amendment and let the people of America vote. There are a lot of things that make this different than any state and territory. But the most important when it comes to statehood is the 23rd Amendment of the Constitution.
So do it, if it's going to be a statehood question, it should be done by constitutional amendment. It should not be done by, you would oppose a unilateral action by Congress to make DC a state, correct?
And I would tell all my, yes, I would.
Okay.
And I would tell all of my friends, hey, Hop, I would tell them this. It's going to go, if you go down that path because you want to be politically popular or whatever you're seeking out of this, you know it's going to go to the Supreme Court. Every legal scholar has told us that. So why not do it the right way and let the people vote and see if they want to change?
It's interesting that he claims to have done a deep dive because any individual who did a deep dive on this matter would want to understand how all these other states became part of this union, right? How did other parts of this country become states? Was it done by a constitutional amendment? No. That's actually not how it happened. So the reasoning that he's giving you is ridiculous, and he's also lying to you when he claims that he's done a deep dive. He's done no such thing. In fact, Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton, also a Democrat, said that those who make such an assertion are conflating a policy choice and a constitutional requirement. All 37 new states were omitted by Congress, and there has never been a successful constitutional challenge to the admission of a state. The Constitution commits admission decisions solely to Congress. Looks like she did a deep dive. Looks like she did a deep dive. Maybe with Jordan Ewell, who hosts a show called Deep Dive on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/TYT. But Senator Manchin did not do a deep dive.
Yeah, and nor is he allowed on Deep Dive to show.
He's allowed, but he'll get crushed.
Yeah, we allowed him here. I did an interview with him on TYT. I thought it went fairly well for me as Jenks. All right, anyways, Tom Zawacki is one of our members, and he wrote in, Anna, you should have ended the joke at Joe Manchin has thoughts. Okay, so now let's get to the reality. So now you know that every state was admitted without an amendment. Alaska was in 1959, simple majority of Congress, Eisenhower signs it, it's done. It's that simple, okay? The very thin excuse they have is, the 23rd Amendment talks about the District of Columbia, where that holds the seat of power, and it gives them the ability to vote for president, okay? It sets up a system to do that. Okay, great. Where does it say in the 23rd Amendment that it cannot be a state? No, it gave them some representation. Now, it left out their representation in Congress, so they don't have senators and they don't have a congressperson. Now, the fact that they let them vote in the presidential elections does not mean that they were not allowed to have a congressional member or be in a state. I read that amendment 3 times today because he said it so confidently. I was like, wait, did I miss it? Does it say somewhere that it's not allowed to be a state? No, it doesn't say that at all. Does it say that they're not allowed to have any other representation? It does not say that at all. And if Joe Manchin is so confident that he's right about the Supreme Court, well, then that's easy. And he's got a 6-3 advantage you packed with conservatives, right? So why don't we vote to make DC a state and then let it go to the Supreme Court? And if you're right and you've done your deep dive, then the Supreme Court, which is very conservative, will read the amendment and go, yeah, it prevents DC from being a state and you'll win. That's it, problem solved. So you have no excuse not to vote for it, okay? Now guys, let's go to the heart of the issue. There's over 700,000 people in DC and they don't get to have representation. We did the American Revolution because of taxation without representation.
Yep.
That is exactly what happens, ironically, in our nation's capital. And so it's unconscionable, and there is no logical argument against it. That's why Senator Tom Cotton had to go to deeply racist arguments.
Yes, in fact, we have that deeply racist argument for you. Just as you watch this, keep in mind that DC's population is 46% Black or African American. So it's an important stat to keep in mind as you hear the ridiculous argument that Senator Cotton makes in this video.
Washington doesn't have the size or diversity of interest of even the smallest of the 50 states. Washington also doesn't have the diversity of interest and financial independence that Madison explained were necessary for a well-functioning state. Yes, Wyoming is smaller than Washington by population, but it has 3 times as many workers in mining, logging, and construction, and 10 times as many workers in manufacturing. In other words, Wyoming is a well-rounded, working-class state. A new state of Washington would not be.
So he's claiming, first of all, who cares what type of jobs the people living in any particular area hold? Democracy is supposed to be democracy, and people living in DC deserve representation. Also, he's just lying to you. He's pretending as if he cares about workers, when in reality, what he's actually concerned about in terms of DC not being well-rounded enough is the fact that nearly half of the people living there are Black. That's what this is about.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look at the code words he used. They were not very well disguised. There's not enough diversity of interest there. In other words, there's not enough white people there. When you talk about diversity, when it comes to Black people, it's like, diversity is terrible. We don't need diversity. Tucker Carlson every day talking about how diversity has hurt this country, not helped this country. When there's not enough white people, all of a sudden, wait, we need diversity. We need diversity, otherwise you can't be a state, right? And then there's not enough financial interest there. Are you saying there's not enough bankers to bribe you? What the hell does that mean? Okay, there's not enough logging and mining. I checked the Constitution. I'm pretty sure you don't need to have logging or mining to be a state. That's an absurd claim. But my favorite of the racist, they weren't really dog whistles, they were human whistles, we could all hear it, was when he said, it's not a well-rounded working class state. You racist piece of crap. What the hell does that mean? Well, there's no people working in the District of Columbia? They're not well-rounded. Yeah. How, Tom? How are they not well-rounded? How are they not working for a living, Tom? Okay, so now we all know Tom Cotton's racist. He just declared it. But I'm here to tell you that anybody who votes against DC statehood, they're voting against it for 2 reasons. One, they don't want the Democrats to have another state where they would have 2 senators. That's obvious. Let's acknowledge that, right? So I get why the Republican Party doesn't want it. But Manchin, he's a Democrat, so theoretically he would want 2 more Democratic senators. Number 1, he doesn't because he would lose some leverage.
Yes.
He loves being kingmaker, right? But number 2, more importantly, the only other reason to oppose DC as a state is I don't want those hundreds of thousands of Black people voting. I don't want them represented in Congress because they're not well-rounded. They're not diverse enough. They're not working class enough. So if Joe Manchin doesn't mind the Democrats picking up 2 seats, there's only one other reason he'd be against DC statehood, because he's a vicious racist. So I don't care if he cries about that. It's, no, I just want to take away voting rights from hundreds of thousands of African Americans, but I will get hurt, my feelings will get hurt, not from taking their votes away, but if you call me a racist for taking their votes away. Well, I got bad news for you, Senator Manchin. No deal, you're a goddamn racist. Anyone who votes against DC statehood is definitely racist, saying those Black people should not have representation. If by the principles of our founding fathers, they should actually do a revolution. Now, I don't want them to do that. I want us to do this in the constitutional and political way. But when the people in power say, no, I don't want these Black people to be represented, you're gonna have massive problems.
Yep.
And the least of which is us explaining to the audience how racist Joe Manchin is. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.